Today I sit down with author, researcher, and dogman expert, John Bell. You've probably seen him on Discovery Channel and various other documentaries talking about the wild men, the Bigfoot, and the dog men. He's had his own show, told me some really wild stories about the Kandahar giant and underground bases. This guy's just a wealth of knowledge. But that's not what we talk about in this episode, okay? In this episode, we get into biblical history. And it's kind of a smorgasbord conversation, but I think you're really going to enjoy it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the journey, guys.
Disclaimer. To the Pharisees and Karens out there.
How dare you!
All guests on this show do not reflect the opinions of the host. The purpose of this show is to have interesting conversations, stretch our minds, and grow.
Not what we want!
If you are looking for an echo chamber, viewer and listener discretion is advised.
You talk about extreme.
What is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we're about to fill it up.
Torches high.
Look at it from a different perspective.
Hey guys, what is happening and what is up? Hold out that glass, baby, because you know what time it is. We about to fill it up. Welcome to the Prometheus Lens Podcast, a place where the conversations are always enlightening. I am your host, Doc Brown, and here we like to use the allegory of the Prometheus Lens to take a second look at everything. Well, hey, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the hero's journey. Be sure and hit that like button and smash that subscribe button. Be sure to check out this banner below with all of our social medias at their various platforms, man. That would be much, much appreciated. And hey, if you listen on Apple or Spotify, straight up, I know, you can tell me all the time, the ads suck. I know the ads suck. I pay $20 a month to get around them on YouTube, so I feel your pain. But hey, for $4 a month, you can get an ad-free listening experience. And hey, if you can't afford it, guys, hey, that's cool. But suffering through the ads, that's your way to contribute to the show that you love and listen to every single week. And I want you to know that I appreciate it very, very much. Well, guys, I got a great show lined up for you. We've had some spiritual warfare on this one. We've had some technical issues. We've had some close friends and relatives have some sickness, and we had to cancel some shows, and I had to cancel with him once. So it's been a roller coaster, man. But so normally I have these interactions and these problems when we're about to have a real killer show. So I think we're going to have a real killer show tonight in store for you. But I'd like to welcome to the show for the first time, hopefully the first of many, Mr. John Bell. John, thank you for joining us today, brother.
Hi, everybody. My name's John Bell. I'm from Cajun, Louisiana. I used to be a state trooper here, former military before that, and come from a military family, raised conservative, Jesus-loving family. And I grew up a Protestant with a large family out of Texas. And I ended up converting to Catholicism later when I was older because of some religious experiences I had. And God started giving me visions and prophecies about the future. And none of it was pretty. None of it was nice. And that led me on a path. I left the state police to go study for the priesthood, to try to become a priest. And I was training to be a monk for a while with some religious orders. And I decided God was taking me on a different path. And I've got a journey I'm on now that I'm trying to accomplish for hopefully a spiritual revival across the country. But I can't get into too much detail about that right now because there's powers that be that are working very hard to try and stop all that stuff before it starts. So if you would, keep me in your prayers. That God unites a fire across this country, because it doesn't take long looking at the news to see how, dark or late the hour is. You know what I'm saying? So, but anyway, that's my short bio. I did work in Hollywood for a stint, Christian Hollywood, if you will. And, I wrote a film, about, Bigfoot attacking a family on a farm. And, I put it out there as like a horror film, but it's really not. It's like a psychological thriller. And I try to make it really redemptive. And it's funny because I was training in a Hollywood producer program, a I was training in a Hollywood producer program in Hollywood where they were training, producers in the industry. And I was the only guy in this like Christian company called act1program.com. If you're interested in Hollywood, that's the place to go. That's the place to be. They are super professional and involved at every level of the industry, act1program.com. But anyway, I trained there as a producer and screenwriter. And I was the only Christian guy there pitching basically 4 horror films. They're always like, John, we love your material, man. We love it. But yeah, we're going to go with this, happy little feel good Christian project over here. But my thing is, hey, you know what? Horror's real. And, and when do you see values really come out in people or their character, right? It's revealed under stress. And what greater stress than when you're facing, real evil, right? So that was my take on it. In fact, one of my favorite movies was The Exorcism of Emily Rose, right? Well, I got to do a private screening with the two. There were 2 men that both co-wrote and directed that film. One's a faith believer, one's not. And one was affiliated with my company, Act One. And I spoke to them about the project, and it was based on a true story about a young girl that got possessed, and she wasn't possessed because she was involved in evil, which is usually the number one thing. Like the movie The Exorcist, that was based on an absolute true story. It was a little boy, but the little boy was playing with a Ouija board that his aunt gave him, and that's how he opened himself up to these spirits that took over. And it was a real deal, but he unknowingly opened himself and invited that stuff in. And young people today do that in all kinds of ways. Drugs, living really sinful lives. I mean, all you're doing is opening yourself up and inviting these things in. Whether you know it or not, you're giving them legal authority over you in your life. So with Exorcism of Emily Rose, that case was different because this was a very holy young woman from a young age that came from a good, holy family. And she, God gave her the possession as almost as a gift of suffering, if you will. That's a concept that a lot of Protestants don't understand, but we've got documentation on lives of saints throughout history on them taking on suffering as a means of trying to unite themselves to the suffering of Christ on the cross, and God using that to help us serve in His mission of the salvation of souls. Of course, Christ is the only Redeemer. But the beautiful gift of that Redeemer is He allows us to join Him in a mystical way. That's it's a complete mystery. It's hard to even understand. But in the Bible, where Jesus says, if you want to follow me, pick up your cross and follow me. Well, picking up that cross means following Him to His cross on Calvary. And in Christianity, we don't escape the cross. We learn to embrace the cross, but with love, with hope, with faith. You know what I'm saying? So that's the idea. We join Jesus on His cross or next to His cross. That's the concept. And then even the apostles all had to face martyrdom. And I do mean all the apostles. A lot of times people are like, oh, wait a minute, John. There was one that didn't have to. John the Beloved. That's not true. John the Beloved had to face martyrdom. The difference was that God preserved him from dying. They threw John the Beloved in a vat of burning oil, but he lived. And the Romans got scared because, they believe in all kinds of powerful deities. So when they saw that his was protecting him, they're like, whoa, this is some bad mojo, some bad juju. We're not going to try and mess with this guy again. We'll go stick him in a nice quiet place where he won't annoy us on Patmos. You know what I'm saying? So, but there's another take on that situation, by the way. John was the only apostle that did not need to be martyred. See, amongst the martyred, you have the white robed army and the red robed army in Revelations. The red robe is martyrdom, which is one of the key ways of entering the kingdom. Not the only way, of course, but it's one of the preeminent ways. And the other is perpetual virginity. And that's what John had. See, most of the apostles were older, middle-aged, like even Peter. Peter was already married. Some of them, some were married with children already. So, and you got to understand, their culture is not like our culture. In their culture, everyone gets married, and you do it from relatively younger ages, you know. But that said, and it's just it's a major part of their culture. If you're not married, if you don't have children, you're cursed by God in their view. You know what I'm saying? Now, John was young. John was actually studying to be a temple priest at like the Sanhedrin, and was connected. But he was young enough that he wasn't tainted by the stuff that was affecting them at that time, and got turned on to Jesus. But that's why he was the most beloved of apostles and the one that was able to lay his head on the breast of Christ, because he was the virgin. There was a story one time of Mary Magdalene. Everyone knows a story where she came in the house when Jesus was invited to have lunch supper at this nobleman's house. And she comes in and starts washing his feet, right? And drying it with her hair and everything. Well, there was a mystical source I read one time that I loved, and it said this. It said Mary Magdalene was not a common person. She was drop dead gorgeous. I mean, she was super attractive. And it said that when she entered that room, said every single man in that room looked at her with lust, including all the apostles, with the exception of two people. One was Jesus, and two was John the Beloved, the virgin. And so I think that goes a long way. Perpetual virginity, something that's almost unheard of in our world today, because it's not given the prominence that it used to be in culture. And it's seen as something negative today. But there is a closeness that you can get to with the Lord through that perpetual virginity that you can't get. Well, I won't say you can't get in other ways, but it's much harder and longer to get than it is on the faster, more sure path that John was able to achieve, you know? So, so anyway, that's my rant on John and the apostles. But yeah, so I wrote a basically, I pitched it as a horror film because the movie I wrote, because in Hollywood and in production, studios, production companies, investors, they love horror films. That's why you see so many of them, because it's the only genre where you can have a small, low-budget film with no leading star actors that can still make as much money as an A-list film. You know, look at the Blair Witch Project, for example, made $400 million. You know, it was brilliantly done. Look at Paranormal Activity, another one, super low budget, knocked it out the park. You know what I'm saying? So that's why studios, investors, producers, they love that stuff. So that's why on my first one, I chose that project. But I also have kind of a dramatic flair for the macabre and mystery and things like that. I was saying yesterday when we talked briefly on the phone that somebody once asked J.R., or this is a quote from Peter Kraft, and I'm paraphrasing, so forgive me, but Peter Kraft wrote that a woman asked J.R. Tolkien at a book signing one time, why do you only write about mystery, of fantasy? And the response that Peter Kraft said was, I don't write about fantasy. I write about the mystery of the world that we have come to forget. And I was like, wow, that's deep. That's heavy. Because what we're starting to see, what we're starting to learn now, that as Christians, we haven't been really aware of before, is how much of our past is coming back to haunt us in our present. And you can't understand. When I started at my university studying theology, every professor I had that day started off the class saying the same thing. I don't know if that was coordinated or if that was just like, you know, the spirit working, but it hit me like a bat. And that was this: you don't know who you are until you know where you come from. So you need to go back and study your genealogy. You need to study your history. You need to study where you come from, you know, to know who you are and where you're going. So it's the same thing with the Bible. we have to understand, especially what happened in the pre-flood times, to make sense of things that are taking place now and what's coming next. Because we're living in a time of high biblical prophecy being fulfilled. And I mean fulfilled. Now, people all the time are like, John, man. Okay, yeah. People say this every generation. My grandfather said this. My great-grandfather said that, you know. Oh, it's the end of the world. Look at it. I said, yeah, one generation's going to be right. But, you know, and then I've got other friends that say, hey, you know, Jesus says you can't know the time and the hour, so get off that. And I'm like, wrong. We don't know the time and the hour of the second coming. That's reserved. But when it comes to the end times, Jesus told the apostles, look at the seasons. He says you can know the season. No, look for the season. You can know we're in the season. You know, my people, we are in the season. All right. And I'll give you some examples of that put us on a timeline. Okay. One of those examples that put us on a timeline is, look in Jerusalem, they're getting ready to rebuild the third temple. Okay. They're getting ready to rebuild the third temple for the first time. And we've been hearing about this for a very long time, but now it's actually taken place. In fact, recently there was a guy on a show that said that he had ashes from the red heifer that they were going to sacrifice. Well, if you're familiar with the red heifer, I did a show on this on my channel, Harbinger Report. I did a show on the eclipse, and with the eclipse, I added in the red heifer, because here's a crazy thing about that eclipse we had. That eclipse crossed the United States over a line, right? And it passed over 8 different cities named Nineveh. What does that tell you? That's scary as hell if you know anything about history. God, remember Jonah and the whale? God destroyed Nineveh because of their sins, right? And he sent a warnings. He sent Jonah to warn the people, and he didn't even want to do it because he didn't like those people. I want them to be destroyed. And God's like, well, you know, or who's the master and who's the servant? You know, try jumping off the boat and see what happens. You know what I mean? So, and then people are like, John, you know, they repented and God spared Nineveh. No. They repented for a short time, then they quickly fell back into their sinfulness, and God wiped them out. God wiped them out, destroyed them, gone. All right? So God fulfilled his promise. Now, when that eclipse crossed over the United States, it passed over 8 cities named Nineveh. I say that is a major warning from the Lord. That's not a coincidence. In fact, I always tell people, I believe in conspiracy theory because man conspired to kill God. All right. Man conspired to kill God. And the Bible says they conspired to do it. Conspiracy is real. How do we know this? It's the very nature of how evil functions. It's the nature of evil to conspire against the good in the dark, behind closed doors, in secret. Because it's a cancer. It's like mold, fungus. If it does it in the sun, if it's exposed, it's destroyed. End of story. It can't function. So the very nature of evil is to function in the dark, in secret, to conspire. So to say there's no such thing as conspiracy theory is to say the same thing is, oh, the devil's greatest job is convincing people he doesn't exist, right? And to take that a step further, the greatest job is convincing people that the devil's servants don't exist. And going back to Jesus in the desert when he was tempted, remember the devil showed him all the power of this world, right? All the power of this world. He tempted Jesus. He tried to tempt Jesus with and said, this could be yours. This has been handed over to me. So who controls the power in the world? Who controls who gets power in the world? Who controls who's given power in the world? Well, the Bible's already told us. And that's why we see so many leaders in our world right now that are bringing us on a quick, sure path to destruction. Right now, we see communism taking over the whole planet. We see communism spreading all through Europe. I mean, all through Europe. Of course, you got China. Large parts of India are communist socialist. Large parts of the Philippines now, same way. South America, communist socialist. You know, communism, socialist, two sides of the same coin, right? It's almost the same thing. So, and if you look at the Bolshevik Revolution of Russia, it was communist. It was communism that took over. And right now, many of our leaders were facing the same thing. Look who just got elected as the mayor of New York, an open professed communist, you know? Like communism, I don't know how that happened so fast because, you know, we fought wars to stop communism. And now all of a sudden you've got all these
universities.
What's that?
All the universities, you have all
Yeah.
these teachers that
That's
was
it.
indoctrinated in the 60s into this same ideology.
That's it.
And that generation just turned the blind eye. And then those kids from the 60s got educated and went into the education system, and now they are poisoning the minds of the youth.
That's 100% correct. And I saw a document years ago, and I wish to God I had gotten the sources on that and kept it. But it was a document where they had a 15-hour DVD of explaining their sources for this document. And in the document, they were talking about how the Rockefeller family set out to turn the education system, the universities, to align with their value system. And that's basically, we're seeing the fruits of that now. So, but it's crazy.
What Russian ruler was it? It was either Russian or German that said how to destroy the United States basically was from the inside out, and you do it through the education system. That if you infiltrate the education system and push in communism and things like that, that it's one generation from collapse.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly who it was that said that. Stalin made some statements similar. Stalin was famous for saying, it doesn't matter who votes in an election, it matters who counts those votes.
Are you a hunter, a hiker, or just an outdoor enthusiast? Well, if you are, you know that good quality gear is hard to come by. And finding all-American made is like finding Bigfoot in the woods. Hence the name of Squatch Survival Gear. Head on over to squatchsurvivalgear.com. Use the code PLP10 for 10% off store-wide.
Meaning they rigged the votes. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, but I've heard similar things, but I don't know a direct quote on that. But yeah, so you got to know your past to be able to understand where we're going. And that's where the Bible is so important to that. And all of a sudden we're seeing across the board more and more talk about the giants and the Nephilim and things like that. And that's hugely important. Hugely important. One thing I've been seeing across my feeds lately, like I've never seen before, is people are saying, especially Protestants, are like, why are you listening to this King James Bible written by a king who's not any good? And yet look at the Ethiopian Bible that was the first Bible before that. Well, so that's making a lot of news right now, is the Ethiopian Bible. And I heard, the guy was the guy that has that channel Cuttlefish. Is that right? On is it what F channel or whatever? You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know.
Yeah, he's been on Rogan. He's the guy that he does like conspiracy shows, and he does a fantastic job. And he has the little fish bowl next to him with the little goldfish that like makes snarky comments. You know,
okay, I think I've seen a clip or two.
Yeah. That guy's phenomenal. He's great. 9 times out of 10, I know the story he's talking about before he does, but I have heard some original stuff from him that I didn't know. But that said, he came across my feed yesterday, and he said that there was this man that was trying to find the source of the Nile River, which is the longest river in the world, and was trying to find the source of it, and wound up in Egypt and then to Ethiopia. And that's where they said they told him about this Bible that they called like the Bible, right? And so now he misquoted when he was talking on the show, and he said it was a Jewish sect. They weren't Jews. They were Coptic Christians. Coptic Christians is one of the first forms of early Catholicism, like the Orthodox Church. They were one of the earliest, if not the earliest, in the church out of Egypt and then spread to Greece and Antioch. All right, as far as being Coptic, but they developed this sect in Ethiopia where they do have this Ethiopian Bible, and the Ethiopian Bible is distinct because of the fact that it has the apocryphal books in it. So it has the book of Enoch in it. It has the book of Jasher, Jubilees, and some others that are not considered canon in the Latin Vulgate. For those that don't know, and I've gotten in many knockdown, drag out arguments with this, but they can argue till they're blue in the face. This is history. And it's all recorded. But it was the Catholic Church that created the Bible 300 years after the death of Christ. It was Catholic councils like at Nicaea that said we need to put forth we need to create a document that we say is the authoritative teaching of Christ. And the purpose of that, the reason was at that time, see, here's how the devil works. If you have truth, and say you're looking at a clear pond and you see the truth of it, like the goldfish, say is the truth swimming around, you see it perfectly. The devil comes in and wants to stir up the silt. So now that pond's dirty and you can't see the fish anymore, the truth. You see what I'm saying? So one way that the devil works, and we have to be very careful of this, is he will make multiple claims of truth, all to obscure and hide the one line that is the truth by covering it up. You see what I'm saying? That's how he works. So what happened is the early church leaders were having a major problem that all these books, scrolls, whatever you want to call it, started to pop up claiming to be teachings of Jesus. But they were not teachings of Jesus. And many times they taught things that were completely different than what Christ actually taught. This would be one of the books of Peter, one of the books of Mary Magdalene, one of the books of Thomas the Apostle, a book of Judas. These are all books that were considered, these are not lawful because they teach contrary to what Jesus actually taught. So those
the Nag Hammadi texts.
Yeah, those are rejected on that purpose. So the church said, what we need is to come up with a source that we can say is the one authoritative source. When I was in college, my first go round, I was studying criminal justice to become a state trooper. There's my state trooper plaque right up there above my flag. But anyway, I was studying criminal justice to become a state trooper. By the way, found out later, criminal justice degree is one semester different than sociology degree, which is socialism. Back to what we were talking about with universities. They're training all cops to be socialist communists. All right. That's not a quinky dink. All right. So anyway, when I went to college, my first go round, I actually had a professor that was a communist, and I stood up in class one day and I said, "You're an effing communist." And I said, "What are you doing teaching in this university?" I said, "My grandfather fought in World War II to kill people like you." And I quit, and I left and quit the class. Now that would make you'd be canceled for that kind of stuff and everything else. But I'm losing my train of thought. Where was I?
He's talking about the Nag Hammadi texts and how people are trying to hold up the Ethiopian Bible.
Got it. So when I was in criminal justice, we would bring in guest speakers to come speak to us. And one day we brought in a guy with a Secret Service agent. All right. And one of my buddies from high school that was there with me ended up joining the Secret Service later. But anyway, so we had the Secret Service agent come in and he gave us a talk, and he said something that really stuck in my mind. And he said this, he says, part of our job with the Secret Service is recognizing counterfeit bills, right? And he said, it's impossible for us to find all the counterfeit bills because there's just too many of them. We can't do it. So this is what we do. We do the opposite. We take the authentic bills and we memorize every single detail of what's authentic. So that way, now we know if we ever see something that contradicts that, we know it's false. Well, That's what God did in creating the Bible. That's why God created the Bible. The whole purpose of that was so we could have one authoritative text to say, these are the teachings of Christ. All right. These are the teachings of Christ. So that if any other book, any other scroll, any other mystic, any other revelation ever comes that counteracts anything that's in that Bible, it's false, because the Bible is given the authoritative word. It doesn't mean it's the only thing God gave us. And this is something else. I get into arguments with my beloved Protestant brothers all the time. They're like, show it to me in the Bible. Show it to me in the Bible. Show it to me in the Bible. Because I tell them something like out of theology, and they're like, show it to me in the Bible. Well, I can do that. All right. And it's super simple. They hate this answer. But if you go to the last chapter of John and read the last paragraph of John, and what does John say? Jesus did so many things and performed so many miracles, we couldn't record them all. Because if we did, it would take up entire libraries. All right? Entire libraries. All right? So the Bible was never meant to be every single thing Jesus said, did, and taught. It is meant to be one authoritative source for the main points of what Jesus wanted to give across with his good news and his teachings. You see what I'm saying? So, that was the reason that the Bible was first created. Now, for whatever reason, and the first Bible was translated from, we already had an Old Testament that was in Greek, known as the Septuagint. I have a copy of it right next to me under a pile of books. So we had the Old Testament. Saint Jerome, who was a hermit that lived in a cave, he had a lion at the front of the cave to deter guests because he didn't want people bothering him. It's kind of funny.
I need one of those.
Yeah, right. And he translated the New Testament and the Greek, and he formed what was called the Latin Vulgate. The Latin Vulgate is the first Bible ever, the first full Bible ever truly written and created. And it was written in Latin by St. Jerome. Then he gave it to the councils with the bishops who were the successors of the 12 apostles. Every bishop today, every Catholic bishop they track their lineage, goes back to one of the original apostles. Every single one of them, going all the way back. Unbroken line, unbroken succession. Just like the Pope has an unbroken line all the way back to Peter. That said, I absolutely couldn't stand Francis, and so far I'm not any fan of Leo. But that's a whole nother issue I won't go into in our limited time. But so the Ethiopian Bible came on the scene around the same time. It's very hard to find sources on this, but I believe that what happened is the Ethiopian Coptics took the Bible that was written in the Vulgate and they retranslated it into their own language, which is perfectly fine and normal. We read from English Bibles, even though I've got copies in the original Latin, etc. But that said, they translated, and for whatever reason, they chose to add the apocryphal books like Enoch, like Jubilees, like Jasher, and some others. Now, in the West, they decided to keep those books out of the canon, but they didn't keep. So a lot of people today think, Catholics and Protestants think, oh, we shouldn't read those books, these apocryphal books. No, they weren't rejected because of false content. I don't know why the Western Church decided not to add those, and Ethiopia did add to their canon. I'm not sure exactly why, but one thing that comes to mind is this. Do you remember, oftentimes God tells the prophets, close these books and seal them, for they are reserved for the end time church. Okay? So it seems to me there was a reason that God wanted these things sealed up. And now I claim we are at the time when God says, open these books and make them known to my people, because this is the time that they were preserved and reserved for. And to quote Chuck Missler, a Protestant minister who I love, all right, He said that if you don't read the book of Enoch and understand the entire Bible through the context and lens of the book of Enoch, then you don't understand the Bible. It's literally, Enoch is the Rosetta Stone for being able to understand the rest of the Bible. And I think more and more as time goes on and more that I've learned and studied, I think Chuck Missler hit the nail on the head. I think he was absolutely right. And I got to say, Protestants have done a much better job in research in these areas than Catholics. A much better job. The Catholics are way behind the ball on this. And
one thing too is Graham Hancock. Not that long ago, I read his book, The Sign and the Seal, talking about the Ark of the Covenant. And he was a journalist, so deep diving and finding these rabbit trails and following to the end. That's his expertise, But he talked about it led him to Ethiopia, his investigations for the Ark. And forgive me if I'm mispronouncing this, but I think they call it the Nahabra Nagast or Nabra Nagast. But basically, it's the Ethiopian legends and lore.
Right.
And in there, they say that Sheba was their queen, and when she went to meet Solomon,
right,
that they hooked up and got together.
Yeah.
And that she left and went back to Ethiopia, and not knowing it, but she was pregnant.
Right.
And the first, the child that was born was a male, and they named him Menelik the First. Mm. And through his succession is where you get all these legends and lore of the Prester John back in medieval times. But when he followed that, trying to find where this ark was, he said that he found a bunch of writings from Templar time people that when they went down there, that they had wrote down in their journals that they were seeing this Hebraic Christianity practiced, that there was Christians, but they were still doing a lot of the old things. They were sacrificing and doing bloodletting and the old practices of the Hebraic peoples. And they kept talking about that, how that just blew their mind. And he kind of followed that little rabbit trail and was talking about this Ethiopian text and said that from the legends and what he could gather, his opinion was that maybe that story did hold some water. And where Menelik the First came back to Solomon when he was an adult and said, "Hey, I'm your son. I'm Sheba's son." That he took him in for a while, but then he steals the ark, is the way the story goes, and takes it back to Ethiopia. Right. And where he spent all that time with Solomon, he knew the Old Testament and the scriptures.
Yeah, I'm familiar with
that. Spread that to Ethiopia.
I'm familiar with that story, and that's one of there's a couple of leading theories on the ark, and that's one of the top of the list right there. Others are Templar ones that they got it out to through whatever. I follow what I believe personally. I believe the story of Ron Wyatt, and I know you've done a show on that before on your channel, haven't you, Ron Wyatt? So I believe that's the true story, because if you look in the Bible tells us exactly where the ark is, and I mean that in a general sense. The Bible talks about God cursed man and the Shekinah glory cloud, which most people have no clue about. You remember the movie Raiders of Lost Ark? Right?
Yeah.
You remember? I got a poster of it on my wall on the other side of my room with the ark on it. As I just said that, I'm just putting the two together. But anyway, you remember at the end when they open it and the spirit came out and their faces melted? That was the Shekinah glory cloud. That was a real thing in the ark. That was it was a spirit that was like the wrath of God. And that's why entire armies would fall, et cetera, et cetera. All right. There was a prophet that witnessed the Shekinah glory cloud as punishment of mankind leaving the ark and going back to heaven. But later after that, remember the Babylonians encircled Jerusalem because they were going to attack, right? So they had the ark in the temple at that time, and they didn't have a way to get the ark safely anywhere because Jerusalem was surrounded. Okay. So there's where we know the ark was there physically. We know they were surrounded by an army and they were out of time. So the prophet told his servants, go find one of the caves outside, because there's millions of these little caves outside the city. They said, bury the ark in there. Make sure you make a note of where you put it so we can go back and find it later, but bury it there to hide it from the Babylonians. And that's what they did. And then when they came back, he says, did you record where it went, where you put it? And they said, no, we lost where we put it. And the prophet said, well, that's God's will. You're right. So we know where it is. The Bible tells us where it is. And that consequently is where Ron Wyatt found it, led by God, but he found it outside the city of Jerusalem. All right. And then if you listen to his story, which is very warm and heartfelt from a very genuine Protestant, I tell people all the time, especially Catholic friends of mine, I'm like, hey, man, it was a Protestant that God led to the Ark of the Covenant, not any Catholic. And they're like, and I'm like, get over it. Be humbled. You know what I mean? Let God choose his servants, not who you think it should be, right? So that said, though, God led this man, I believe, Ron Wyatt, to the discovery of the ark. And you know what sealed it for me? I mean, what absolutely sealed it for me is in the course of his searching of the ark, which he claims he found, he says he found also unintentionally the actual crucifixion site, which was right above where the ark was buried. So this is what Ron said. Ron said that we know the Bible says that the ground split open from the cross, right? And Jesus was stabbed by St. Lawrence with the spear, St. Longinus, all right? With the spear of Longinus. And we know that blood and water flowed out from his heart and lungs down the spear and down the cross, all right? Down his body, down the cross. It went through that crack that opened up in the ground, and it poured out upon the top of the ark. And what is the top of the ark called? The mercy seat. So the sacrificial lamb, his blood was sacrificed, and his blood was poured over the altar of the mercy seat in expiation for the sins of mankind. When I heard that, I was blown away. Because there's a lot of rules I discovered in studying theology. And one of those rules is that these are rules I made up for myself, just being inspired and seeing patterns and studying theology. But one of those rules was this: if something is the absolute most beautiful way it could possibly be, then that must be the truth. Because God wouldn't do it any other way. God would only
I thought that was
do
a beautiful picture. And it even says, Jesus, what did he say? He said, I come to fulfill the law. Well, that was fulfilling the law. The law is, on the Day of Atonement, they would take the blood of the sacrifice and sprinkle it onto the mercy seat for the forgiveness of all sins. So he literally fulfilled the law. With the price of eggs and bread slowly approaching a day's wages, it's more important than ever than to secure the value of your dollar. One thing that has remained steady is gold and silver throughout the ages. Back in Roman times, a piece of gold would get you a toga. That's the equivalent of $3,000 today. That still remains true to this day. For a full suit, shoes, tie, you're looking at about $3,000. Because gold and silver holds its value. So if you're tired of watching the value of your dollar go down every single day, it's time to get off your hands and make a move. I've recently teamed with Cornerstone Asset Metals. Reach out to those guys for all of your financial needs. It's time to trade in that forever devaluing dollar into hard assets that you can hold, like gold and silver. Be sure and check the link down in the description or the number on the screen. And hey, tell them Doc Brown sent you.
So so the sacrificial lamb, his blood was sacrificed and shed, and his blood was poured upon the mercy seat, upon the altar of the Lord, in expiation for the sins of mankind. It couldn't be more perfect than that. It just couldn't. Now, here's something else of Ron Wyatt. Ron Wyatt talked about angels appearing to him. See, we know that the ark is depicted with two angels facing each other, two cherubs, right? Those depict, in theology, we have a saying that is as above, so below, right? So the physical representation of those two cherubs on top of the ark represent two spiritual angels that guard the Ark of the Covenant. So there are two angels that when God commissioned the ark to be created, they were given orders by God to guard the ark. And they never have left his side, not for 1 second. All right. If you found the ark today, like Ron Wyatt did, and you walk in there, those two angels are present. Okay. So, that's another reason why I don't buy stories of, well, yeah, somebody's son went back and stole the ark and ran off with it. If it wasn't God's will, you're not touching that ark or getting near it, or you're going to die. In fact, there's a story of Ron Wyatt that a lot of people don't know. And that is, he claims he found the ark. Now, remember, he had to get permits from Israel and their government in order to dig and search for the ark. And they gave it to him. And there's a long story about that, but to keep it short, they gave it to him. He promised if he found it, he would let them know. Now you can imagine this is important to Israel and their government, because to them, this is called the Holy of Holies. There's no greater holy object on planet Earth that connects them to God than the Ark of the Covenant. All right. So that's why it's called the Holy of Holies. There's nothing else. So yeah, they're invested in searching for. If the Nazis were invested in searching the world for the ark, you can doggone bet that the Israeli government is going to be 10 times that, if not 100 times that, right? So anyway, Ron Wyatt says he found the ark, gave his report to the Israeli government. So they know. He went home back to Tennessee, and later he got a call from the Israeli government saying, will you please come back here? Have you ever heard of this story?
Yeah, because it wasn't that long ago, which I got it from my paying members, but I was invited to Mary Nell's house. I went down there to her house, and she took me down in the basement, and I got to touch the cross hole. I got to touch a piece of Noah's Ark, and it was amazing.
I want to touch you now. Hope that didn't come across as creepy. But yeah, so Ron got a call from Israel, and they said, we need you to come back here. And he's like, why? And they said, because we've sent in 6 priests of the clan of Levi, all right, modern descendants of the clan of Levi and the Jewish faith. We've sent in 6 priests to retrieve the ark, and not one of them's come back alive, and it's been like over a week. So they asked him, they're like, we assume they're dead. And they wanted, since Ron was already in there and like even, I believe, touched the ark, they wanted him to come back and just retrieve the bodies. That's what they asked him. So he goes back there, being the man that he is. And sure enough, he goes in there and he retrieves 6 dead bodies, all dressed in the headdress of full priesthood of the Old Testament. All right. And Ron noted that their eyes were all wide open and like cross-eyed, all of them. And doctors told him, he said, that meant that they saw something that scared them to death. All right. They saw something that scared them to death. But another story of Ron Wyatt, when he was with the ark, and going back to what I was talking about earlier with the blood being poured upon the mercy seat and the altar of the Lord and sacrifice of the sacrificial lamb. When Ron Wyatt was in there, he was talking with the 2 angels that made themselves known to him. And he said that there was this brown, kind of dried up, viscous biological material that was on top of the mercy seat, the top of the ark. And Ron asked what this was. And the angels instructed him to take a sample of that, to scrape some up and take a sample and bring it to labs and have them tested. And so Ron Wyatt did that. They rehydrated the sample because it was dehydrated, and they flipped out, the labs flipped out when and this was even done in Israel. So when these Israelis saw this blood, they were like, this is astonishing. And they went back to Ron Wyatt and they said, this doesn't make sense. Whose blood is this? They said, number one, we reconstituted it with water, and the cells all started moving. They said, this stuff's like thousands of years old, but it's blood that's still alive. It's still alive. It's not dead. It's alive. Number one. Number two, they said the chromosome count doesn't match because whoever's blood this was, they have a biological mother, but they have no biological father, which is impossible in the human genome. So the Israeli scientists went to Ron Wyatt and said, whose blood is this? And there's that video where Ron Wyatt breaks down crying and says, this is the blood of your Messiah. This is the blood of your Messiah. You know, how powerful is that? You know?
And that Hezekiah tunnel, too, I didn't know it till I talked to Mary and his brother William. They had a replica of a pomegranate ornament. And they said, this is a replica, but this is what Ron found down there in Hezekiah's tunnel. He said, and historically they can prove that these were like tassels on the edges of the priestly robes and ephod.
Right.
And he found it and turned it over to the government because, like you said, he agreed that whatever he found, he'd let them know and turn it over. Right. So he did, and he come back home, and he had drawings of it and told everybody about it. And then all of a sudden, that thing disappeared. And you've seen it on Discovery Channel and History Channel. It was a big deal because so many years went by. Then all of a sudden, the government was so enthralled with finding this pomegranate with the etchings of Yahweh on it, dating back to the Second Temple period to when the ark disappeared.
Right.
And that supposedly this thing had popped up on the black market.
Right.
And the Israeli government was trying to buy it back. But I didn't know that till I talked to Mary Nell and William that no, Ron is the one that found that and give it to the government. So obviously somebody in the government stole it and then sold it, and it got back onto the black market. But it just kind of validated Ron's story even more to me.
There's another part of Ron's story that most people that even have studied Ron don't know about. And I got into an argument with Liz's friend Cash over this issue. And that was Ron's deathbed confession. Have you heard that story? So,
no, I've not heard that.
There's an official audio. I've heard it a couple of times where there was this reporter. Ron Wyatt was on his deathbed, all right? And this reporter thought he was a wise guy and thought he could show up Ron Wyatt and get him to confess he was lying. So, because he didn't believe this wild, crazy story that Ron Wyatt told about Noah's Ark, the crossing of the Red Sea, and then later the Ark of the Covenant, right? So, but that's who God uses. He uses humble little people. You know what I'm saying? But that said, this reporter goes to Ron Wyatt on his deathbed and does an interview with him and says, listen, you're a Christian. You're about to meet your maker. Is there anything you want to come clean with before you die? Thinking that they would get a confession, right? Thinking they got him trapped. And Ron Wyatt said, no, everything I said was true. And then he says, but I'll tell you another part of the story I haven't told before. All right. And that was the part of the two angels appearing to him in there. And he went into more detail about that. And one of the things he said was this. He said that the angels told him that God wants the ark to be sealed and hidden. He wants it to remain hidden till his appointed time. And in his appointed time, God's going to take that ark and reveal it publicly to the whole world. And they said it will be in the
I heard that in that interview he did where he had that vest on, and he was a lot older, and he was crying, telling that story. He told that same story that they were putting it away till the end of the
I only heard
an audio.
I only heard an audio in that part, but he said, And you could tell he was like having trouble speaking even in the audio when I listened to it. But he said this, it will be in a time, God's not going to reveal the ark until his time. And it won't be until a time when, number one, the Sunday service has been removed. The Sunday service has been removed. And number two, the mark of the beast is enforced. When the mark of the beast is enforced. Now, I have some original stuff that the Lord, I believe, revealed to me. There's a flip side to all of this, okay? And that is the return of Elijah the great prophet. I believe, and I'm working on a book about this, but I believe it'll be Elijah the great prophet. Remember how Elijah the great prophet had the big showdown with the worshipers of Baal in the Old Testament, and he called down the fire from heaven, right? I believe that same thing's going to play out again in our time. I think you're going to have the Antichrist take over in the temple in Jerusalem, the third temple. And he's going to take over the world with his one world government where he's the leader, just as, we've heard a thousand times, and I believe that will happen. But there will be a showdown where Elijah reveals the Ark of the Covenant to the world. And when he does, he will call down the fire from heaven, which is what Elijah does, upon the ark. And remember, in the Old Testament, at night when they carried the ark around through the desert, you had the whirlwind. What do you call it?
Pillar of fire.
Yeah, almost like a tornado of fire that would descend upon the ark to light up their way in the desert at night. So I claim that same thing is going to happen again with Elijah the great prophet. And I believe that the result of that, there's going to be more to it. I don't want to give too much away at once, but there's going to be more to it that the Jewish people will realize at that point when they see their Holy of Holies finally revealed and they see God's fire coming down with God's prophet, they will finally realize, come to know that Jesus Christ was their Messiah.
Yep. That's what he said too. I've seen him in many videos talk about that the God or the angels revealed to him that's why he was holding it back, because it's to bring in his people at the last moment,
No,
to give
I have
them
not heard
the
that
proof
part.
they needed to bring them in.
I never heard that part, but that confirms what the Lord told me. But I've never. You said that's the first time I've ever heard that. But that confirms what the Lord told me. And the Lord gave, when I was studying in Rome, I was studying at a pontifical university in Rome, theology and the history of the Bible. It was a year-long class, 5 days a week. We went in the entire history of the authors of the Bible. But that said, it was phenomenal. But God was giving me prophecies then about the return of Elijah, the great prophet, and who's going to appear soon, because I claim the Antichrist is already here. And that's where I said too, I'm working on a book about the identity of the Antichrist. And when I say the identity of the Antichrist, I don't mean, is it Jim Bob? Is it, is it this guy over here? Is it that guy? Is it this leader? No. Like I said earlier, you have to understand your past to know your future. So what I'm trying to reveal in the identity of the Antichrist is who he was in the past, who he actually is. And as we discussed yesterday, the short version of that is I claim that the Antichrist is Nimrod, who built the Tower of Babel. I told you about, I called my friend Rob Skiba before he passed, right? Who did tremendous work on this as a Protestant, and did a fantastic job. Absolutely love Rob Skiba. I was very honored to do a show with his son Jeremiah, and sorry for their loss. But that said, Rob Skiba points out very clearly, the Bible says, where does the Antichrist come from? He rises up from out of the abyss. So it's not a normal human. It's somebody who literally comes from the abyss. All right.
And it says repeatedly the spirit of Antichrist.
Right. Well, there's a spirit of Antichrist, but there's also a Antichrist in persona. in persona, in the flesh. All right. So you have both. You have a spirit of
See, I always
Antichrist.
took it as kind of like an incarnation, like
Yeah.
the spirit, like demonically attaches to someone to become the fleshly antichrist.
And not just that, but it's actually a demon from the abyss that comes back. And that I claim, just a short, I could go on for hours just on that one topic, but just to be very brief, I claim it's Nimrod who built the Tower of Babel. Now here's a kicker. A lot of people get the Tower of Babel story completely wrong. I hear my priests in church every year, fumble through this, and theologians mess this up all the time. The Tower of Babel was not a tower to reach the heavens. It wasn't a physical tower to reach the sky. It was a stargate. It was an interdimensional portal.
Ancient CERN.
That's right. You're 100% right. So God said he had to intervene and stop Nimrod from building the tower because he had the ability to do what he was trying to do. Well, how did he have the ability to do what he was trying to do? What he was actually doing, he wasn't trying to dial up heaven and storm heaven. That's impossible. God is too powerful. That can't be done. What he's talking about is Nimrod, who perceived himself as a Nephilim, was angry at God for wiping out all the Nephilim in the flood, with Noah's flood. So he wanted to create, with fallen angel technology, which is super advanced intellect and technology, he wanted to create this portal, this interdimensional gateway where he could bring back the fallen. He could bring back the fallen angels. He could bring back the fallen Nephilim giants. He could bring back all these creatures, nightmare creatures, if you will.
The return of the golden age.
That's
when
it.
The gods walked amongst men.
Not just when the gods walked amongst men, when the gods ruled over men. That's the problem.
Yes, exactly.
That's why God had to wipe them out. And not just that, but it was also changing what they were as men. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, corrupting the image of God, man.
That's it. History.
I agree 100%.
History always repeats itself. What's happening right now is not new. This happened in the Old Testament, and it led to God destroying the human race to cleanse it. Because it was changed. It was altered. On the tiniest level. I'm trying to watch my words.
Yeah.
But
you're good. Hey, but John, I don't mean to cut you off, brother, but I need to kind of wrap this up. I got another show I got to get to here in about 15 minutes.
All right.
If you got any kind of final statements, or to kind of put a bow on it, or let people know where they can find you, if there's anything you want to plug, like a YouTube channel, website, or anything like that.
My show is Harbinger Report on YouTube. Harbinger Report with John Bell. Like I said, I haven't done many shows lately on there because I told you I was stepping back and taking a break for a while. I was getting frustrated with them removing my subscribers and views from my channel. And that really upset me. Plus, I'm working on some other things. But I'm getting ready to start up doing some other shows. I've had some guests come back saying they want to come back on. And I want to talk more about the coming of the Antichrist. Because I think that's super important for our time. And that it was Nimrod. Nimrod's not a name. That's only a title. That's not his real name. And so I'm going to be revealing his real name. And we've discovered his body, his actual body. And I'm going to explain how that makes sense and how it could work. And I've got friends that have seen this body face to face. I'm going to show video footage of it that was released by U.S. Special Forces soldiers. It's being kept in underground military bases, and I'm going to be doing shows on all that information. So, but it's super important because we are in the time with the third temple's being built, the Euphrates River's drying up. Yep, the Euphrates River's drying up. So these are signs of the times. That means we're in the last final hour, okay? And I claim that the Antichrist isn't coming. He's here right now, and he's given marching orders to move the chess pieces on the board to bring us into World War III so they can destroy the three major superpowers and recreate their new one world globalist government, he will be seen as the peacemaker to world war that leverages him into the spot of being voted the one leader of the entire earth. And he will force the mark. So that's all coming. And we're going to see this in our lifetime. Now, here's something super important. No Christian on planet Earth is going to be able to survive once the mark of the beast is enforced. The world's armies are going to be behind this, all the authority of the world. No one's going to have a bank account and be able to buy food, diapers, medicine, anything, gasoline, if you don't have this
Repent or
mark.
perish.
Right. So Christians have two options. One, you either face martyrdom, which is noble, until the sword or guns in your face, and it's a whole nother deal. You better pray every day for that moment.
Slowly starve to death.
Right. You better pray every day for courage for that moment to face these times. But two, God is preparing places that he calls refuges that are small, wilderness, remote communities that are self-sufficient, like Noah's Ark, around the entire world that he's creating. And he's saying that we need to prepare for to be self-sufficient in those times so that we can survive outside of the government. And that's the only two ways. It's either that or you take the short ticket to heaven. And believe me, do not take the mark of the beast. When the mark of the beast comes, by the way, my intuition tells me the mark of the beast is going to officially be released to the world publicly.
I lost you. It froze for a second.
Yeah, my system's starting to lag just as I mentioned that. I think that the mark of the beast is officially going to be released to the world publicly at the end of 2029, beginning of 2030. It won't be completely forced right away, but it'll be announced, and then it'll be encouraged and more until it gets to the point it's forced. But we have a limited time to get yourself right with God, with your family, with people, right the wrongs in your life. We have a limited time, and pray every day that you have the courage to be able to face martyrdom if that's God's will for you. God has a different mission for each one of us. You need to find out what that is. You only know by spending time with him, right? So we need to find out which each mission we have is and realize how little that time is. And we have to prepare ourselves and our family and our friends for the limited time that we have in order to fend for this. I mean, some people are going to have children that face this in martyrdom. And man, it might be real easy for you to accept martyrdom, but can you watch your wife or children go through that? You know, there's stories of that in the Bible. So take this time and pray and get close to Christ as much as possible. Because these are the times we're facing.
Yeah. Well, brother, I appreciate you coming on. But guys, I meant it when I said it. Hopefully this is the first of many. This man is a wealth of knowledge, and you only seen one hat. This man's got many hats. He is a dog man hunter and researcher. He's been on Discovery Channel and other networks talking about dog man and Bigfoot research, and we had some conversations last night. He knows some people connected to the Kandahar giant underground domes that supposedly held Nephilim giants and other cryptid creatures. So this guy has got a lot of good stories to tell, and I hope he comes back and tells them to us. But be sure and check out his stuff, guys. I will get some links from him and try to get those in the description, try to make it easy for you to find him. But John, once again, brother, thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we can have you back for some of those great stories, because I really want to have the listeners hear some of the ones that you told me on the phone.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Be sure to check out his stuff, man. And just remember, fellas, guys and gals and pals, that the difference between the known and the unknown is the journey. So, good journey, guys. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation, and I'm sure Jason made it look phenomenal, because, guys, we had a lot of technical issues with this one. Where he lives, the internet is not that good. He had a satellite connection, and it kept sputtering and breaking up and freezing, so we just done the best that we could, and the audio was kind of wacky when we recorded. So I hope it came through good, and Jason, I'm sure he did a fantastic job. I already know it. But yeah, man, it was a nice conversation, man. We got into Ron Wyatt, biblical history, the Antichrist, and Nimrod, and portals. It was just a really good, rounded kind of smorgasbord conversation that I really enjoyed. But I want to have this guy back because I talked to him on the phone, and he has military friends that's come and talked to him on his shows previously about working in the Dumbs and how they have these cryptids. And they have these Nephilim giants and stuff in basically prison cells in these dumps. He knows somebody that had first-hand knowledge with the Kandahar giant. And like I said, he is a dogman expert also. So I really, really look forward to talking to this man in the future and deep diving on some of those other topics. But hey, man, let me know down in the comment section, what did you think of this episode? And would you like to see me bring him back on about these cryptids and these underground facilities? Torches high, guys.